Terrifying yard sale tales, 5 horror stories that'll keep you up at night. Welcome to DTC, the place of the brave, where we dive deep into the spine-chilling world of unsettling tales. In today's episode, we'll be exploring 5 disturbing yard sale horror stories that will make you rethink ever attending one. What seems like an innocent trip to score a bargain can quickly turn into a nightmare. From cursed antiques to sinister encounters, these stories prove that some deals aren't worth making. So sit back, turn down the lights, and get ready to hear about the dark side of yard sales that no one dares to talk about. Story 1. The Mysterious Toolbox. It was supposed to be an ordinary Saturday morning. I was running errands, mostly to get out of the house and shake off the monotony of everyday life. The neighborhood flea market caught my attention as I passed by. There was nothing special about it, just a collection of random items, most of which seemed to have no value or purpose. But for some reason, something drew me in. Maybe it was the lingering scent of old books and forgotten memories in the air, or perhaps it was the strange feeling that I was meant to find something today. As I sifted through piles of old records, antique knickknacks, and broken furniture, my eyes landed on a dusty wooden toolbox. It didn't seem like anything out of the ordinary at first glance, but there was something oddly intriguing about it. The box was weathered, its surface scratched and stained with time, and there was a faint smell of mildew emanating from it, as if it had been stored in a damp corner for years. The metal clasp looked rusted, and the hinges creaked when I touched them, but something about it felt important. I couldn't explain why, but I felt an undeniable pull toward it. It was as if the box was waiting for me, calling me to take it. It was ridiculously cheap, too, just a few dollars. I could hardly resist the impulse to buy it. I wasn't sure what I would do with it, but I knew I had to have it. Maybe I'd use it to store some tools or odds and ends in the garage. So I handed over the cash and brought it home, hardly giving it another thought. For the first week, the toolbox sat quietly in the corner of my garage. Every now and then I'd glance at it, wondering what kind of history it might have, but nothing seemed amiss. It was just another old object gathering dust. That was until one evening, exactly 7 days later. I was sitting in the living room watching TV when I heard a knock at the door. It wasn't a friendly knock, more like a forceful rapping that made me feel uneasy. I opened the door, and there stood a man. He looked disheveled, his clothes torn and dirty, his face gaunt and pale as if he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were wide and frantic, and he spoke in a hurried, breathless voice. "I need it. The ring inside that box. It's mine." His voice was trembling, and he wouldn't stop staring at me, almost pleading, like his life depended on it. I was taken aback. "The ring?" I asked, trying to make sense of what was happening. "I bought this box at a flea market. I don't know anything about a ring." But the man wasn't listening. "The ring belongs to me," he insisted, stepping closer, his hands trembling. "I have to get it back. You don't understand. Please, you have to give it to me." His words didn't make sense, and his behavior was becoming more erratic by the second. It was almost as if he wasn't entirely there, like he was being driven by something darker. But despite my growing discomfort, I felt a strange obligation to help him. Maybe he was just another lost soul, desperate for something that had slipped through his fingers. I told him that I had paid for the toolbox fair and square, and that the ring wasn't mine to give away. Reluctantly, he left, muttering under his breath, but something about that encounter lingered in my mind, like a dark cloud that wouldn't dissipate. I tried to shake it off, but I couldn't. There was something wrong about that man, and the whole situation felt off. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept racing, replaying the man's frantic words over and over. The next day, I decided to open the toolbox again, just to see if there was anything unusual inside. I don't know why I hadn't done this before. Maybe it was curiosity, or perhaps it was the sense that something was hidden inside, something that I wasn't supposed to find. As I lifted the lid, I noticed something strange. Beneath the layers of old tools and rusted screws, there was a hidden compartment, a false bottom I hadn't seen before. My heart skipped a beat as I pried it open. Inside were several small plastic bags filled with a fine white powder. My mind raced as I realized what I was looking at: drugs. It looked like heroin or cocaine, but I wasn't sure. All I knew was that this was something I shouldn't be involved with. I immediately slammed the box shut, my hands trembling. What had I gotten myself into? Why would someone hide drugs in an old toolbox? And why was that man so desperate to get it back? I tried to brush it off, thinking maybe I had stumbled upon a bad deal, some criminal transaction I wasn't supposed to know about. But deep down, I felt a creeping sense of dread. It wasn't over. The toolbox had drawn me into something much darker than I could have ever imagined. That night, the noises started. At first, I thought I was just being paranoid, but then I began to hear faint tapping sounds, like someone gently knocking on the walls of my house, or footsteps moving around outside. It wasn't just the wind. This was deliberate, slow, methodical. It was as if someone was trying to make their presence known without being caught. I tried to ignore it, but the feeling of being watched grew stronger every night. And every night I lay awake, my mind racing, my body stiff with fear. Then it happened. A few nights later, around midnight, I heard a loud crash downstairs. My heart stopped. I grabbed a flashlight and crept down the stairs, the beam shaking in my hand. The front door was wide open, and I could see shadows moving outside. My body went cold as I realized someone had broken in. I backed away, slowly, but I didn't make a sound. I knew it was them, the same men from before. They were here for the toolbox. I tried to barricade myself in the bedroom, locking the door behind me, but I wasn't safe. I could hear them in the house, their footsteps growing closer. They were searching for something. The box. The toolbox was the key to something much bigger, something I couldn't fully understand. But I knew one thing for sure. These people weren't going to stop until they got what they wanted. I stayed silent, my breath caught in my throat. For what seemed like hours, I waited, praying they wouldn't find me. But it wasn't long before I heard the unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps approaching my door. The knob rattled, and a low, almost guttural voice spoke from the other side. "We know you have it. Give it to us." The terror coursing through my veins was unlike anything I had ever felt. I wasn't sure how they knew where I was, but it was clear they had been watching me, waiting for the right moment to strike. But why? What was so important about that stupid box? I thought about the drugs inside, the dangerous contents I had uncovered, but there was something deeper, something darker tied to that box. It felt like a curse, like a chain had been wrapped around me the moment I touched it. There was no escaping it. When they finally broke down the door, I knew it was too late. My only option was to run. I grabbed the toolbox, the weight of it seeming heavier than ever, and I bolted out the back door into the night. I changed the locks. I moved everything I could out of my house, even though I knew it wouldn't be enough. They were still out there, watching, waiting. I couldn't go to the police. They'd never believe me. They wouldn't understand the terror that had taken over my life. And so I buried the box, deep in the woods, far from anyone's reach. But even now, I can still feel its presence, like a phantom looming over me. Every time I close my eyes, I can see the shadows moving in the dark. The men are still out there. They haven't given up. And one day, they'll find me again. They'll come for the box, and they'll come for me. And maybe, just maybe, it won't be the last time it calls someone else. Good luck sleeping tonight. Do you dare to listen to the dark? If tonight's tale gave you chills, let us know your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear what creeps you out and what other stories you'd love us to explore. Don't miss out on the next terrifying story. Subscribe to DTC, The Place of the Brave, and join the family that thrives on the unknown. Tap the notification bell so you're the first to hear every spine-chilling tale. Share this video with someone brave enough to face the darkness, and let's dive deeper into the creeps that haunt our world. Comment below and become part of the terror. The darkness is calling, and we want you with us. Story 2. The Shadow in the Rearview Mirror. It was a late night, and I was driving home after a long meeting in the city. The streets were eerily quiet, with only the faint glow of streetlights illuminating the deserted highway ahead. The world around me felt distant, as if it was holding its breath. I wasn't the type to get spooked easily. After all, I had been in plenty of stressful situations in my career and personal life. But tonight was different. There was something unsettling in the air, something that I couldn't quite explain. I had driven this same route countless times before. It was a stretch of highway I knew well, one that felt safe and familiar. But tonight, there was an odd sensation creeping over me, like I was being watched. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was there, just behind me, but every time I checked my rearview mirror, the back seat was empty. Still, the sensation remained. Every time I glanced into the mirror, I could almost feel a pair of eyes on me, but when I looked back, there was nothing. At first, I told myself it was nothing, just the result of a long day and maybe a little exhaustion. But the feeling only grew stronger with every passing mile. It wasn't just that I felt watched. It was as though something was waiting for me, something not human. Each glance at the rearview mirror confirmed it. There was something there, but I couldn't make out what it was. The shadow wasn't shaped like a person. It was more like a wisp of darkness, a presence that seemed to flicker in and out of existence, fading when I looked directly at it, but always there at the edge of my vision. I tried to ignore it, but the sensation grew stronger. It felt like the shadow was following me, drawing closer with every mile. The road was so quiet, the only sound the hum of my tires on the asphalt. The more I thought about it, the more I couldn't shake the sense that something, someone, was slowly closing in on me. Then, for the first time, I saw it clearly. As I glanced at the rearview mirror, I saw the unmistakable shape of a man. A tall figure, dressed in a long black coat, standing motionless in the back seat, his eyes locked onto mine. My breath caught in my throat. I froze for a moment, unable to process what I was seeing. His face was expressionless, his gaze unnervingly direct, as though he was staring into the very core of my soul. My hands tightened on the steering wheel, and my heart pounded in my chest. But when I turned around, the back seat was empty. It was just a shadow, a trick of the light. I tried to convince myself that it was nothing, that I was just tired, maybe imagining things. But the shadow had felt too real. And when I glanced at the rearview mirror again, there it was, this time clearer, more defined. The same dark figure stood behind me, staring, motionless. My stomach churned with dread. It felt as if the air inside the car had thickened, pressing down on me, suffocating me. I rolled down the window, hoping the cool night air would help clear my head, but all that came through was a suffocating silence. The wind didn't move. The world outside seemed eerily still, as if time itself had slowed down. Every muscle in my body tensed. I could feel it. It was getting closer. The shadow in the rearview mirror was no longer a flicker of dark mist. It had taken on shape. Then my phone buzzed. I nearly jumped out of my skin, my heart pounding in my throat. I grabbed the phone, hands shaking, and saw a text message from an unknown number. It read simply, "I'm right behind you." Panic surged through me like ice water. I slammed my foot down on the accelerator, speeding up without thinking, my eyes fixed on the road ahead. But when I dared to glance in the mirror again, the shadow was still there. It hadn't moved, hadn't changed. It was as if it was chasing me, no matter how fast I drove. I pressed harder on the gas, my heart racing, but the figure remained in the mirror, a constant, unwavering presence. I couldn't escape it. Every turn, every swerve, it stayed with me. The fear gnawed at me, cold and relentless. And then suddenly I felt a chill, an intense cold that seeped into my bones. I looked in the rearview mirror once more. This time the shadow wasn't just a figure in the reflection, it was real. There, sitting in the back seat, was a pale man with lifeless eyes, staring straight at me. His face was ashen, drained of color, and his lips curled into a faint, unsettling smile. I couldn't breathe. My hands trembled and my vision blurred. It felt as if the shadow was reaching out for me, its coldness wrapping around me, suffocating me. My mind screamed for me to get away, to do something, but I was paralyzed. I had to stop. I had to get out of the car. With a sharp turn, I pulled over to the side of the road and threw the car into park. My feet barely touched the ground as I bolted out of the car, not daring to look back. I ran towards a nearby gas station, my heart hammering in my chest, my body shaking uncontrollably. I didn't stop until I reached the well-lit safety of the gas station. I glanced back toward my car, but I couldn't see anything. I called the police, my voice shaking as I explained what had happened. They arrived quickly, and when they inspected my car, they found nothing. There was no man, no shadow. Everything was normal. But as they examined the rearview mirror, one of the officers found something strange. There on the glass was a faint handprint, so faint that it looked like it had been smeared with water, but no matter how much they wiped it, it wouldn't disappear. I stood there in stunned silence. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of it all, but nothing made sense. How could the handprint be there? Who was the man? And why had I felt so sure that I was being followed? I didn't drive home that night. I stayed at the gas station until dawn, unable to bring myself to go back to the car. And to this day, I can't shake the feeling that someone is still watching me. Every time I look in the rearview mirror, I feel that presence again, lurking just behind me, waiting. I don't know what happened that night. I don't know who that man was or why he followed me, but I do know this. Whatever was in that mirror wasn't just a trick of the light. It was real, and it's still out there. Do you dare to listen to the dark? If tonight's tale gave you chills, let us know your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear what creeps you out and what other stories you'd love us to explore. Don't miss out on the next terrifying story. Subscribe to DTC, The Place of the Brave, and join the family that thrives on the unknown. Tap the notification bell so you're the first to hear every spine-chilling tale. Share this video with someone brave enough to face the darkness, and let's dive deeper into the creeps that haunt our world. Comment below and become part of the terror. The darkness is calling, and we want you with us. Story 3. The VHS Haunting, a chilling tale of forgotten shadows. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon when I stumbled upon the old VHS tape. It wasn't the kind of treasure you find in the glossy aisles of modern stores, but rather the type that lurked in the dusty corners of garage sales and forgotten thrift stores. The table was piled high with secondhand books, worn-out furniture, and an array of trinkets that seemed to hold memories of forgotten lives. The VHS tape, a plain black casing with no label or markings, was tucked beneath a pile of old magazines. It didn't seem special at first, just another relic from the past, but something about it caught my attention. Maybe the sheer anonymity of it, or maybe I was simply bored. I bought the tape without a second thought. The old man running the sale gave me a sly smile, as if he knew something I didn't. "Careful with that one," he said, his voice thick with age. "Some things are better left unseen." I laughed it off, assuming it was just one of those quirky lines people say to add mystery to an otherwise mundane sale. But deep down, a small part of me felt a shiver. It wasn't until I got home that I realized how much I had underestimated the tape. When I slid the VHS into the old player, the screen flickered to life, the static humming in my ears. The image was blurry at first, just a mess of colors and shapes, but slowly the scene began to clear. I froze. The living room in the video looked strikingly familiar. It took a moment for me to place it. My living room. The same faded carpet, the same coffee table, the same couch I'd spent countless nights on. The walls, the lighting, everything was exactly like my house. But there was something off, something unnerving about it. I didn't recognize the people on the screen. The family in the video seemed ordinary at first. Mom, dad, and 2 kids sitting in front of the TV. But their faces weren't calm. The parents kept glancing nervously toward the hallway, exchanging silent, panicked glances. The kids were unusually still, their eyes wide, following their parents' every move. Then there was the sound, a low, distant creaking, like the house itself was groaning under some unseen pressure. I couldn't hear it clearly at first, but it was there, faint in the background. Suddenly the tension in the room shifted. The camera, as if moved by an unseen hand, began to zoom in on the hallway. The family grew more anxious, their movements more erratic. The mother stood up, whispering something to the father, but the sound was too distorted to make out. Then the unthinkable happened. A shadow moved across the hallway, something humanoid, but not quite. It passed in the blink of an eye, just a fleeting shape in the darkness. The family screamed. It was chaotic. The father grabbed the kids, pulling them into his arms, and they bolted for the door. But as they ran, the lights flickered, casting grotesque shadows on the walls, stretching and twisting unnaturally. The image on the screen started to degrade, the picture flickering in and out of focus as if the video itself was being torn apart by the forces it contained. The scene ended abruptly, the screen going black. The static buzzed in my ears. I sat there staring at the dark screen for a long while, my heart racing. It felt like the air in the room had thickened, like something had entered, something dark, something that didn't belong. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was no ordinary video. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house seemed louder than before. Every gust of wind outside sounded like whispers. It felt like they were still here, the family, the shadow, the house. I knew it was irrational, but I couldn't help it. I was being drawn into something, like I was becoming part of the story. The next morning, I went to the neighbors. I had to know more. I had to find out who had lived here before me. They were the ones who could explain it all, but when I asked, I was met with blank stares, murmurs, and uneasy glances. An old woman, whose face seemed to have more wrinkles than years, was the first to speak. "You're the one who moved into that house, aren't you?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. I nodded, her eyes widened. "The family before you, they left so suddenly. No one really knows why. They didn't even take their things, just left in the middle of the night, left everything behind as if they'd disappeared." The other neighbors chimed in with similar stories. Some said they'd seen the family packing up late at night, hurriedly throwing things into boxes. Others claimed to have heard strange noises from the house, a faint crying, or the sounds of footsteps when no one was supposed to be there. But no one knew the truth. The family was just gone. I asked if anyone had ever seen them again. "Not since they left," the old woman replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "But we heard stories, strange things. People started talking about the house, strange happenings. People said they saw figures in the windows, but when they knocked, no one answered." That's when it hit me. The family from the video, they weren't just gone. They had vanished. And now I was living in their house. I had moved into the space where their lives had once played out, and where something dark had clearly taken root. The feeling of dread continued to grow inside me. I couldn't shake the sensation that I wasn't alone here. Days passed, but the unease never left. I stored the VHS tape in a box and shoved it into the attic, hoping to forget about it. But the house didn't forget. At night, I started hearing the same noises from the video, whispers, footsteps, creaks. Sometimes it felt like the air in the hallway was thicker, colder, as if something were standing just out of sight, watching me. One evening, while sitting in the living room, I heard the unmistakable sound of a door creaking open. My heart skipped a beat. I looked toward the hallway, but there was nothing there. I tried to ignore it, but the sensation of being watched only grew stronger. I could almost feel the presence in the room with me, its eyes fixed on me, waiting. It was then that I realized something even more horrifying. The video had never truly ended. The shadows that had been cast across the walls of the house had seeped into my own reality. The whispers had followed me. The dark energy that had filled the family's home had somehow bled into mine. The more I tried to forget, the more real it became. And then one night, as I lay in bed, the whispers returned, clearer now, as if they were right outside my door. "I know what you saw," the voice whispered. "I know what you did." I knew then that I would never escape. The haunting wasn't just in the video, it was in the house. And now it had found me. And just like the family before me, I had no choice but to live in its shadow. The tape, the video, the house, they were all part of the same curse, and I would never be free. Do you dare to listen to the dark? If tonight's tale gave you chills, let us know your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear what creeps you out and what other stories you'd love us to explore. Don't miss out on the next terrifying story. Subscribe to DTC, The Place of the Brave, and join the family that thrives on the unknown. Tap the notification bell so you're the first to hear every spine-chilling tale. Share this video with someone brave enough to face the darkness, and let's dive deeper into the creeps that haunt our world. Comment below and become part of the terror. The darkness is calling, and we want you with us. Story 4. The Mysterious Antique Mirror. Sometimes there are things in life you stumble upon by accident, things that once you touch them will never let you go. I'm a collector of antiques, particularly those objects that carry an eerie sense of mystery with them. For me, there's always something more than just an object behind each antique. There's a story, a history waiting to be uncovered. It could be a forgotten item, an artifact lost in time, or something with a dark, lingering presence. And on one fateful afternoon, I found something that would change everything. I found the mirror. It was an ordinary yard sale, or so I thought. The place was tucked away on the outskirts of town, far from the bustling crowds and neon lights. A dusty old barn sat at the edge of a forgotten street, overflowing with piles of objects, some useful, some worthless, and some, well, downright strange. People usually avoided this area, considering it a dumping ground for unwanted trinkets. But for me, it was the perfect hunting ground. There was always something hidden in the pile that might just be the treasure I was looking for. Little did I know that I was about to find something that would haunt me for the rest of my life. There, amidst the dusty clutter, I saw it, a large, ornate mirror. Its golden frame was tarnished with age, yet there was an undeniable beauty to it, elegant, intricate, and strangely hypnotic. The mirror's surface was cloudy and cracked in places, the reflection of light distorted, but even then there was something about it that felt wrong. The deeper I looked into the mirror, the more I felt it was staring back at me. "How much for the mirror?" I asked, unable to tear my gaze away from it. The old man behind the table didn't immediately respond. His eyes, dark, hollow, sunken, locked onto mine. There was a strange stillness about him, an unnerving calmness. "That mirror," he said slowly, almost in a whisper, "is not for sale." I chuckled, trying to brush it off, but I could feel a chill creeping up my spine, and the words stuck in my throat. Something about his tone made me uneasy. Still, I pressed on. "I'll pay a good price for it. I'm a collector. I know the value of fine antiques." He paused, his eyes narrowing, studying me as if he were weighing something invisible in the air between us. "You really want it, don't you?" he finally muttered, his voice barely audible. There was something hypnotic in his words, a slow pull, like a tide dragging me deeper into its reach. And for reasons I couldn't explain, I found myself nodding. Yes, I do. The man's expression shifted, just slightly, almost imperceptibly, and I saw a glimmer of something in his eyes. It wasn't greed. It was something darker, something I couldn't quite place. "I'll bring it to your home," he said after a long pause, "but we'll do it my way." I hesitated, an odd sensation crawling under my skin, but curiosity got the better of me. "Okay, bring it to my place." That night I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, that I had crossed some unseen threshold. There was an air of dread that seemed to settle in my home when the old man arrived with the mirror. The moment he placed it down, I noticed the temperature drop in the room, an almost tangible coldness that seemed to seep from the mirror itself. I tried to dismiss it, telling myself it was just the change in weather or perhaps the odd behavior of the man. But there was something about him, his expression, the way his hands trembled slightly as he handled the mirror, that set my nerves on edge. When he left, his parting words echoed in my mind. "Be careful," he warned before disappearing into the night. "It doesn't let go easily." At first I thought I was being paranoid, but the strange occurrences began almost immediately. It started with subtle things, faint noises in the night, a whispering breeze when all the windows were shut. But as the days passed, things escalated. I found myself drawn to the mirror, unable to stay away. The reflection, it wasn't just me. It never was. I'd look into it, and for a split second I'd catch a shadow moving behind me. I'd turn, heart racing, but no one was there. It was only when I returned to the mirror that I'd see it, just for a moment, before it vanished. But that wasn't the worst part. I began to have strange dreams, nightmares that felt more real than any waking moment. In one dream, I was standing in front of the mirror, but the reflection wasn't mine. A dark figure, its face obscured in shadows, stood where I should have been. And then it spoke. "You shouldn't have touched it." I decided to research the mirror, hoping to find some rational explanation, some history that would calm my nerves. But instead of answers, I found something far worse. There was a story, a dark legend about a mirror just like this one. It had once belonged to a wealthy, powerful family in the 19th century, a family that sought immortality through dark rituals. The mirror, as the legend goes, was the vessel through which the souls of the departed were trapped. It was said that whoever possessed it would slowly be consumed, their life force drained by the souls it had captured over the years. I read on, feeling the chill of fear crawl down my spine. The mirror was no mere object. It was a prison holding something dark, something restless. The souls within it were never at peace, and they fed on the living. Now I could feel them, feel their presence behind the glass. The mirror was no longer just an object. It was a gateway, and I had opened it. Every night the whispers grew louder, the shadows more distinct. I could see them now, not just in the reflection, but in the room with me, their pale faces pressed against the glass, their hands reaching out toward me. The more I looked into the mirror, the more I realized the truth. I wasn't just looking into the past. I was looking into something that had no place in this world. The souls, the shadows. They wanted to take me. They wanted to drag me into the mirror with them, to add my soul to the collection. I tried to get rid of it. I wrapped it up, tossed it in the attic, tried to burn it. But nothing worked. It always came back, sitting there, patiently waiting for me to surrender. It's been weeks now, and I can't escape it. I can't escape them. The mirror won't let me. It's too late for me. But if you're listening, if you're hearing this, I warn you, don't ever touch an antique mirror. Don't ever let it into your home. The darkness inside is patient, and it will wait for you just as it waited for me. Because once you look into it, you'll never escape. And one day the mirror will stare back, and you won't like what you see. Do you dare to listen to the dark? If tonight's tale gave you chills, let us know your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear what creeps you out and what other stories you'd love us to explore. Don't miss out on the next terrifying story. Subscribe to DTC The Place of the Brave and join the family that thrives on the unknown. Tap the notification bell so you're the first to hear every spine-chilling tale. Share this video with someone brave enough to face the darkness, and let's dive deeper into the creeps that haunt our world. Comment below and become part of the terror. The darkness is calling, and we want you with us. Story 5. The terrifying memory of a yard sale day. It was an overcast afternoon when I decided to wander through the neighborhood yard sale. The rain had been falling steadily, and the streets were damp, glistening under the muted light of the overcast sky. The usual sounds of the city seemed muffled, as if the rain had swallowed everything, leaving only the faint clink of coins and murmurs of the occasional passerby. The air felt thick, oppressive, like the calm before a storm. It was on days like this when strange things seemed to happen, when the ordinary world felt off. I wandered from one table to the next, my fingers lightly brushing over the strange assortment of items. Dusty books, tarnished jewelry, cracked porcelain dolls, and yellowed old records. But then something caught my eye. It was a small, old-fashioned record player tucked away between a pile of mismatched plates and rusty kitchenware. Its wood was scratched and worn, the varnish fading, but there was something about it that drew me in. Maybe it was the aura of nostalgia that seemed to emanate from it, or perhaps it was the way it seemed out of place, like it had been waiting for me all along. "How much for this?" I asked the seller, an elderly man with a hunched back, his face weathered from years of hard work. His eyes seemed distant, as if he wasn't fully aware of the world around him. He looked at the record player for a moment, then mumbled, $50. It still works, but you might not want to mess with it. Strange things happen around that one. His words were casual, almost as if he'd repeated them 100 times, and yet something in his tone made my skin crawl. I didn't ask what he meant. I just handed him the money and left with the record player, excited by the thought of owning such a vintage piece. The old man didn't say another word as I walked away, his gaze lingering on me like something heavier than mere curiosity. When I got home, I set the record player down on my kitchen table and plugged it in. The familiar hum of an old machine filled the room. I placed a record on the turntable, an ancient vinyl with no label, just a worn edge where it had been played countless times before. With a twist of the dial, I watched as the needle lowered, the faint crackling of static filling the air. I was expecting the usual crackle of old music, a song from the past, something sweet and nostalgic, but what I heard instead wasn't music at all. It was disturbing. At first, I thought it was just the result of the record's age, maybe some degradation in the grooves, but as I listened more closely, my stomach twisted. These weren't just random noises, it was more like whispering, low, muffled voices, just on the edge of perception. It sounded like a mixture of moaning, sobbing, and a strange sort of rhythmic scratching. I leaned in, trying to decipher the sounds, but all I could catch were fragmented whispers, none of them intelligible. The static grew louder, more erratic, as though something or someone was trying to speak through the record. My heart pounded in my chest as I scrambled to turn off the machine, my fingers shaking. I pulled the record off the turntable, but the eerie sound didn't stop. It was as though the whispers had latched onto me, seeping into my mind. My pulse raced as I tossed the record across the room and backed away, my eyes scanning the dimly lit kitchen. The sound, it kept coming. A sickening presence like something was breathing down my neck, even though I was alone. I told myself it was nothing. that I was overreacting, but deep down I knew something wasn't right. The whispers continued, muffled but unmistakable, echoing in the back of my mind long after the machine was powered off. I couldn't escape them. It was as if the voices were following me, lingering in the silence, filling my head with their frantic whispers. That night I lay in bed, trying to drown out the sounds by pulling the covers over my head, but the whispers wouldn't leave. They crawled into my ears, seeping into my dreams. At first I thought I was still awake. I could hear the voices so clearly, so close, as though they were right next to me. It was as though the room itself had become alive, vibrating with the sounds of something ancient, something sinister. When I woke up the next morning, I had to force myself to face the record player again. I was afraid to touch it. I had already tried to throw it out, but it had somehow ended up back on the table. I didn't know how it got there. I had checked every corner of the house, but there was no sign of it anywhere. It felt wrong. I decided to research it, hoping that maybe there was some logical explanation, something I could grasp to make sense of the creeping terror that had taken hold of me. But what I found only deepened my fear. The record player was old, but it wasn't just any vintage item. It had a history that no one seemed to talk about. There were stories, whispers on strange forums about record players like mine. They weren't just machines, they were vessels for something much darker. People who owned them had been known to vanish, or worse, go mad. One story stood out among the rest. It was about a man who had bought a similar record player years ago. He was fine at first, but then he started hearing voices, just like I had. It wasn't until months later that they found him. He had gouged out his own eyes, convinced that the whispers were coming from inside his head. The voices had driven him to madness, and no one knew where the machine had gone after his death. I froze. I could feel a cold sweat gathering on my skin as the realization set in. The whispers, were they getting louder? I could hear them now, even without the record playing. It was a constant presence buzzing at the edges of my mind, gnawing away at my sanity. I looked at the record player once more, and this time it wasn't just an object. It felt alive, as if it had a mind of its own. I didn't know what to do. Every night the whispers grew louder, closer. Every time I tried to leave the house, I felt their presence, like they were watching me, waiting. I could no longer tell the difference between what was real and what was in my head. And then, one night, I woke up to find the record player sitting in the middle of my bed. The sound had stopped, but I knew it wasn't over. It was only just beginning. I don't know how much longer I can keep running from it. The whispers are with me now, always. They follow me wherever I go, no matter how far I try to escape. I can't sleep. I can't think. I'm trapped in my own mind, haunted by something I can't explain. If you ever find an old record player at a yard sale, be careful. Some things are better left untouched, and some memories once uncovered will never let you go. Do you dare to listen to the dark? If tonight's tale gave you chills, let us know your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear what creeps you out and what other stories you'd love us to explore. Don't miss out on the next terrifying story. Subscribe to DTC, The Place of the Brave, and join the family that thrives on the unknown. Tap the notification bell so you're the first to hear every spine-chilling tale. Share this video with someone brave enough to face the darkness, and let's dive deeper into the creeps that haunt our world. Comment below and become part of the terror. The darkness is calling, and we want you with us. Good luck sleeping tonight.